You're listening to Telecast PH. Remote teams have become more crucial than ever to stay competitive, keep revenue lower, and offer customers a better experience, especially when it comes to technical support. But I think what holds a lot of companies back from building remote teams is a fear of the unknown best practices when it comes to running successful remote teams, both onshore and offshore. Well, we're going to eliminate that fear right after the intro. Hello all, and welcome back to another episode of Telecast PH as we continue on with our series about scaling and managing SaaS support teams. I'm Jeff Thompson, your host, Director of Client Solutions here at Telework PH and the voice of offshore outsourcing. Thank you so much for joining. Now, building, training, and leading a remote support team can be scary, even with an offshore BPO partner like Telework PH. In fact, some companies and even support directors are 100% dead set against it, which is fine for whatever reason they may have. However, I'm here to tell you that there are a lot of highly successful companies that were able to become successful, expand, cut overhead, and increase volume because they tapped into the benefits that remote teams offer. The pandemic even showed us how cost-efficient and productive remote teams could be, but there are still those gray areas that may be holding businesses back from exploring the remote team options. And today we're going to put to bed and add clarity to those areas. I recently had a chance to talk with John, a global training and technical support manager with over 15 years of experience at 6Connects and Crestlane Retail Solutions. Now, John is a strategic and innovative leader in learning and development with a deep understanding of how properly trained human capital is the key to an organization's success. But before we get into it, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of this podcast, Telework PH, a premier and award-winning BPO here in the Philippines. Telework PH, we build your team, you get the benefit. To find out more about how we can help transform or help build your support team, or if you're looking for a highly skilled virtual assistant in any area of your business, all you got to do is hop on over to www.teleworkph.com or hit me up on LinkedIn. Just search Jeff Thompson, Director of Client Solutions here at Telework PH and the voice of offshore outsourcing. All right, let's get into that conversation with John. Hello and welcome back to Telecast PH. I have John here with me today, Global Training and Technical Support Manager at 6Connects and Crestlane Retail Solutions. And we're discussing building, training, and managing remote tech teams, areas that John is an expert at executing. John, thanks so much for being here and sharing your experiences and expertise.
Hey, thanks a lot, Jeff, for having me. I appreciate it.
You want to go ahead and jump in and just tell us about yourself and your background?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the L&D tech support field for about 15 years. One of the things I specialize is in building and managing remote teams in global companies. So over the years, I've had the opportunity to work with individuals and teams across the globe in different time zones, in different regions, and also with different cultures. So it's presented me with a lot of opportunity to learn how to develop very effective training programs and management techniques to be able to conform to these changes and nuances in these different areas. So I think it's been a very rewarding experience and one that I've shared across most of my positions.
That is extremely interesting, because we got a lot of questions, getting to the remote teams in the L&D. And so the first thing I want to ask is, do you think that there's a particular challenge when it comes to training tech support teams remotely, like maybe some cultural adaptations, and then, versus training in-person teams?
Yes, I think there's challenges in both of those aspects. So I'll address the first one for you. The cultural aspect is very different, right? So teams in Asia versus teams in Europe versus teams in the Western Hemisphere. We have a way of doing things and a way of speaking that sometimes they don't understand, or the words that we use, or the attitudes that we have sometimes, cultural attitudes. As an example, I had teams in Asia. I'm very familiar with the Asian culture, and I was able to adapt to that because of my knowledge prior from being in the military. But a lot of tech support managers don't have that experience. So they're more disciplined. They need structure. They need different types of organization compared to how we do things here. So you have to understand the teams and the cultures and the areas in which they're housed in order to effectively teach and manage them. That's the first thing. And the other thing would be is that the biggest challenge compared to, training and managing virtual teams versus in person is the lack of being able to see what's going on. Right. That's the biggest challenge. I can't see a person's reaction, especially when I'm training, because when I'm training someone in person, I can course correct that training if I see someone's confused. I can't tell that if they don't speak up. So there are the very clear challenges that all of us face, and they're very easy to overcome if you have the right type of environment and the right type of training modalities in place to address those.
Right. I mean, when you're training somebody overseas, or in a different region, there are things that pop up. And I can speak to this because, I moved to the Philippines 15 years ago. And, just like if you were to go from America, to Canada even, or to England, UK, they all speak English, but different words mean different things. Right. So the same thing here in the Philippines. I mean, they speak top-notch English, but sometimes you come across a word that they use in a different way. So when, those are some of the things that you need to be aware of. And like, you nailed it right there when you were talking about understanding that those little nuances need to be overcome. And so you have to have a little bit more flexibility. So you've worked with global companies, as you said. How do you ensure consistent training quality across different time zones for remote teams?
That's a very good question. So the biggest challenge, of course, is that a trainer on the Western Hemisphere can't be everywhere all day long, right? But we have to be able to provide that training equally to the different teams. Now, if you have a bigger training team, as an example, or a bigger tech support leadership team, then that's probably possible, but most companies don't have that structure. So the biggest thing you have to consider is the type of learning tools that are created in order to deliver that same quality of education to those individuals outside of your native time zone. As an example, asynchronous learning tools. So teams in various time zones can access materials when it's convenient for them. I don't want to ask somebody in Asia to be awake at 3 o'clock in the morning to attend a training class. Right? That's unfair to them. Nor is it fair to ask me to do a full day's worth of work and then also go ahead and teach at 3 o'clock in the morning, my time, right? So it'll be daytime for them, right? Which don't think for a minute I haven't done that before, but it's not a comfortable thing to do. And it's not fair to the, to the employee, right? So that's the first thing. Recorded sessions, very big. Peer learning. So connecting your remote teams in different time zones to other peers within the organization that have already learned these things, right? So they can seek out that information from them and have them as a tool to mentor, as opposed to just being left on your own to fend for yourself through a bunch of documentation, videos, and interactive learning that may have been prepared. It's very difficult, right? And then you have to also facilitate a lot of Q&A sessions across those time zones to address immediate questions. We have to have champions in place that are accessible in those region time zones to be able to answer those immediate questions when the actual main trainer is not available to do that. So this is one way of dealing with that diversification across the world and being able to see that everybody gets trained equally and effectively.
So in that setup, communication though can often become like, transactional, so how do you, when you're training your teams, how do you train your trainers to maintain the human element of customer interactions, ensuring that empathy and personalized service don't get lost in the remote environment?
The biggest challenge I had was going from in person to 100% remote, right? That happened back in 2013, I think, was when that transition actually happened. And I've been back in an office since periodically, but not full time. I mostly work remote. So all the teams that I've been training since 2013 have been 100% remote teams, except for one, right? So prior to that, it was a combination 50-50. How do you teach somebody that? Well, first of all, you have to have the right instructors, right? You have to have someone, I hate to put it this way, but you have to have a person with a personality and not a person that just dictates, right, and regurgitates information. That's the first thing. You have to engage people, and engaging them is not picking on them or pointing them out. Engaging them is having them participate in the class, right? Having them lead the class is a great example, right? I used to always do this when I did onboarding. I onboarded Six Connects during the pandemic, and I onboarded well over 300 and some odd employees, right?
Wow.
And the way I did that, and these classes were back to back to back and long classes. We're talking like they were all day long, 2, 3 weeks out. They were very long. And I understood that no matter how good I am, that's a lot of time you're expecting somebody to invest in learning, right? So, how do I get them to stay engaged over that lengthy period? Well, I started having them lead the class with me. So I'd invite different students to take the topic with me, and they've already did pre-work, so they should know the basics of the topic. And I had them deliver parts of the classes. That was one way I got them to stay involved. Another one was basically I had people share their experiences that I can incorporate into classes, so they feel part of it. Right? They feel like their experiences and their knowledge is contributing not only to their growth and development, but the growth and development of their peers. So it gives them a sense of purpose, which also gives them a sense of wanting to stay engaged. And then the other thing is that you have to really look at, building activities that, build teams, right? It's not just about learning. It's not just about managing. You got to build a team that respects you as their leader. You don't need to manage. I'm going to just go back to my famous saying. I don't believe that we need to manage anybody. I think the word manager is probably a horrible term. We're leaders, right? We hire people based on their ability and their professionalism. A person should lead themselves, right? Manage themselves. My job is to lead you, guide you, mentor you, and support you, not manage you. Because if I have to manage you, then basically, why did I hire you in the first place? Right? That's my philosophy of management, right? I believe that the managers should be leaders, not managers, and that people should manage themselves. So one of the things I teach in all my classes is self-management. And it gives them that autonomy to take ownership over the projects that they are assuming and be able to drive them forward in the way they see fit to fruition, and gives them a sense of accomplishment. So what I'm trying to really get to is you have to set a standard and a baseline to build the team from day one, that the team will grow and learn together and move together and work as a unit together. And that's only fostered by changing the culture or building a culture of inclusiveness and contribution and ownership and responsibility, and also just being there to support them. That's the big thing, right? Being there and having that open door policy where they feel comfortable talking to you, and you'll always be there to support them in their decisions and back them up and guide them through the proper way of getting things done.
A lot to unpack there. I love what you said about, the manager part. It is almost an archaic term now that you put it the way that you put it. It makes perfect sense. And I know here at Telework PH, we use manager as a title, more as what level are you, but when we speak internally, yes, we always use the word leader. I know I have a great assistant, Daisy. I don't have to manage her, but she'll reach out and ask me questions or whatever, so, and we have a discussion. So that's more of a leadership role, and I'm trying to get her into a leadership role. But management, it does kind of, a manager does kind of sound like you're sitting there and telling somebody do this, do this, do this, do that. That's exhausting. That's extremely exhausting.
Who wants to micromanage like the old days, right? It's like I tell my teams what needs to get done. I trust them to do their job because they're professionals. And if they need my help, they'll reach out to me, right? I have, I have this philosophy where, I'm happy when I don't hear from them, right? Because it means that things are getting done and they're getting done correctly and they're not having any issues. But when they do reach out to me, you have to just be there to support them and do whatever it is in your capacity to help them through that. But I have that relationship with my teams. I've built that relationship with my teams where I trust them. Now, don't get me wrong. I watch what they do electronically. I can see the work that they're doing, right? But I don't have to babysit them. I hate to use that term either, but it's a very big common term. I don't have to sit there and be on top of them 24/7 going, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you getting done today? What's happening here? No, I know at the end of the day, what needs to get done will get done, because they will make sure it's finished, and make sure it's finished correctly. And that's all I really care about, is do your job and take accountability for it.
Right. I mean, and I'm certain all of the leaders listening to this podcast, you and me, we've all been in that situation where you get people once in a while that you do have to babysit. that you
True.
do have to, move them along, and they normally, no matter how much or what you do to try to set them up for success and
Mm.
to teach them to be a little more self-reliant, they just don't make, they want to be told everything, and they don't last. Who has time for that? You know what I'm saying?
Well,
Because if I
you
got to
know,
tell you what to do, then why did I? Yeah, exactly. Like you said, what do I need you for? I'll just do
it's
it.
exhausting.
It is.
It's exhausting. But you know something? One of the biggest problems I think that we'll call them managers, that managers have at the mid-level is that they don't have the ability sometimes to understand how to reach their employees correctly,
Hmm.
right? Each one of the employees I have are different. Okay. Getting to know them at a personal level, getting to know them, their challenges, getting to know whatever, right? So you can understand who's working for you. And the way I talk to employee A may be different when I talk to employee C, right? Because I know how to reach employee C differently. I know what that person needs to get them motivated to go forward to do what they need to do. Employee A, I can just do a very short blurb and say, I need this done, right? And it gets done. But maybe employee C needs a little bit more guidance, a little bit more
Hmm.
structure.
Right.
So it's really, incumbent upon the leader to understand their people, to have a successful team. And this is so important remotely because I can't look at that person. So I have to base it on correspondence, conversation, even in video chats, you can't tell all the time. It's a little
Not
different. I
all
can
the
see
time.
body language in person. I can't see it on video all the time. So it's a challenge and it's an art to learn that. And it takes a lot of adjustments for the leader himself to be able to recognize those things and course correct when necessary to be effective.
Exactly. And I agree with you. You cannot manage every single person the same way because different people respond to different things. So it's not the employee's fault or the staff member's fault because they're not responding to you. It's the leader's, it's on the job of the leader to find how to reach out to each person and make them successful. Okay. I mean that's
Exactly.
for me that's bottom line. And I've been saying that for years. When I was back in America, I mean, I worked in kitchens and there's so many levels of age groups and ethnicities and everything else that I had to relate to, when you're running a team. We had 16-year-olds that are getting off school, you know what I'm saying? So you gotta relate to them. And then but then you've got, guys your age and whatever, I mean, everybody requires a different level of understanding and a different level of touch points when it comes to their training or to their management, right? Well, to their leader, to leading them,
Yes,
you know,
absolutely. And I think the most important thing that can't be forgotten is that they're people,
right.
right? They're not perfect. They're going to make mistakes. And a mistake is not a fatal thing, right? As a mistake is a great learning opportunity. Okay. So how you deal with those mistakes and how you coach a person from those mistakes is paramount to their success. Right. So you can do one or two things. You can either take a situation, especially remotely, it happens, right? I can tell you a recent experience where we had a very big mistake happen with one of my employees, and everybody acted like it was the end of the world. And my attitude was, okay, are we able to fix it? The answer was yes. I'm like, okay, let's fix it. And then I brought the employee in to talk to him, asked him what happened. We dissected the whole thing, figured out where the error was, found a way to make sure it didn't happen again, recoach him, and then send him on his way to be able to be productive, as opposed to grilling him and making him belittled or whatever you want to do. It doesn't serve a purpose. Right. So, it's a matter of people skills, right? Something that we tend to forget is the most important facet of being a leader.
And there are those leaders out there that are looking just to penalize, you know,
Exactly.
and that's no way to approach, and that's just going to bring down the morale of your whole team. It's going to bring
I
everybody
agree.
down.
I
So,
agree.
you had mentioned that you had onboarded 300.
Mhm.
So how did you approach the training for that? When obviously in the 300 they would have different varying levels of experience or expertise.
Yeah, so I'll tell you a funny story, right? So when I was hired, okay, I was asked by my director to put together an onboarding program for the new hires that are coming on board. And I said, okay, I need a few months to develop it, whatever. She goes, you got 2 weeks. So I had 2 weeks to develop an onboarding program for our employees while I was onboarding all of our customers. right? So
Oh,
myself and another person were onboarding all of our customers while I was doing strictly the onboarding and customer onboarding at the same time. So it's a funny story because it's like, who in their right mind can put together a successful onboarding program in 2 weeks, right? I did. And everybody learned from it. So to answer your question, how was that successful? This was more of a majority of it was a very interactive thing. Like our product is intensive building, right? There's a lot of building involved. You have to build out every section of of our platform, right? As a customer. So to teach an employee how our product works, the only way to do that is to get them in a sandbox and have them start building. So I would give them segments of, different features to learn, and they would practice prior to class, and then they come the next day and we'd look at application of that, see how each person did. I'd have different teams set up, split the classes up, and then team A, team B, and they would compete against each other to do certain things in a fun way, right? And then display their end results of what they did. So it was very interactive to the capacity that they were able to do it hands-on and ask questions while they were doing it. So my classes were basically anywhere from, I don't know, 30 to, I think my biggest one I think I did at once was 50 employees at once. And that
wow.
was a little more challenging, right? Because we had language issues, number one. We had, some of these folks I had some from the Philippines, I had some from Latin America, some from Europe, some from the United States, and they were all in the same class. So some of them I found were shy to ask questions, right?
Hmm.
So this was kind of important, right? That they ask these questions, especially the tech guys, right? That were learning too, because they were the ones supporting our customers. So I would make them talk to me, right? I would make sure they spoke to me. I would ask probing questions. I would ask them to explain to me how you would do something. And they finally got comfortable talking, right? And participating, and then got excited to show their end result of their products that they were doing. It's a challenge. It really was. But successfully, everybody got trained. I was told on numerous occasions, if it wasn't for my training, they wouldn't have learned the product so fast. It is a big learning curve, and they pretty well picked up on it. And all of them were very successful. So I couldn't complain too much.
Rock on. Rock on.
Totally.
That's beautiful. So what I want to ask you too, there was another thing, and this comes up a lot when I speak to, our potential clients when we talk about remote teams, because we're a hybrid setup. We have in office, but we also have teams that work from home. And the great thing about that is, that gives us the entire nation of the Philippines to source from, rather than just, a certain radius or location around the office. But when you have, people working from home, and you know what I mean, in that closed environment, and you have the whole entire team that's all working from home, there is often that lack of, the informal learning, or what they call, the water cooler or the hallway conversations that typically happen in an office setting. So in your experience, I mean, how have you ever tried to replicate this kind of informal knowledge sharing in a remote setting?
Yes, actually, we do. So we utilize communication tools a little bit differently, right? So figure like Slack or something like that. The channels we have set up in Slack, they have a lot of interactivity. So we connect to our dev teams. My support teams will communicate with dev. Our company, collaborates in different channels as a group, right? So my company is very unique. We take the opinion of everybody when we make decisions for the most part. What's something I very appreciate about the two companies that I work for is that they're very inclusive to your opinion, and they do listen, right? They hear you as opposed to just listening to you, right? They actually hear you. So it's actually good because we get to be product driven at that point, right? And help, develop our products, for our customers the best way possible. When it comes to tech though, right? Yes, it's very difficult to get them, to speak, but you have to promote those discussions. So I talk to my team daily, right? Multiple times during the day. I reach out to them first thing in the morning. They'll reach out to me during the day. I bring them into peer meetings, one-on-one. I bring them all together so that we can collaborate on things. I try to get all their opinions when I'm making a decision or planning so that they can feel included in that. So the interactivity is really super important, right? The other thing is knowledge-based sharing, right? We don't want to be siloed into, tribal knowledge, because knowledge is power, right? One person having it doesn't give you job security. So newsflash, anybody who thinks that if you hold on to it, you're going to be secure in your job, it doesn't work that way, right? We need to be able to share that knowledge. And the only way to do that is to bring everybody together. Going back to what I said earlier, team building exercises, I do knowledge building exercises with my teams. I have them share and share with each other. Our teams teach each other. We cross train everybody to do everybody's job in the departments that I run. Not one person is going to be the sole guy on the island that can do it. So if person A is out, person B knows that person's job. So this is a big mistake that a lot of leaders make, is that they don't cross train their employees to assume those responsibilities in the event or unlikely event that an employee who's key is out for whatever reason. Interactive training tools. That's another way to get them involved. Doing team competitions in training is a big thing, right? And having a reward basically for which team, finishes at the top of whatever. Gamification is the biggest way of learning in today's society for the younger generation. And not enough companies are leveraging it.
Gamification would definitely make my son learn. He's 13 and addicted to the PS4. I want to, a couple of things there. First of all, Slack for us was a game changer. I absolutely love Slack. It's like Skype's, it's like Skype after it, goes to the gym and works out. And so this, by the way, is not a paid promotion. I'm not being paid by Slack, but definitely, especially when we have so many, different clients and so many different teams, and it's all in one place, different workspaces and everything else. It's all organized in one place. So I'm glad you mentioned Slack. Can you give us a little bit more insight into your knowledge building exercises? That sounds really, interesting to me, because in my mind, I'm thinking that, get people in the room like to share, what did you encounter this week that you can share with everybody? Is it something along those lines, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's partially that, right? Because each person comes across different things. Like my teams are really good at coding, right? So one of our products, right, is able to be customized. If we do the coding, right, then we won't have to do like back-end coding. I'm talking about like we can inject code into it. So one of my guys is really good at custom coding. And he's been very successful in coming up with unique solutions as we're waiting for a bug to get fixed, as an example. He comes up with a custom code that circumvents the problem temporarily, that does the exact thing that needs to be done. And then when the bug gets fixed, of course, then it's a permanent solution. So things like this, where he shares this experience of, what he's done, as an example. I have another one who's great at automation, and he'll come in and teach automation, right? Or show examples of some of the high-end automation. Recently, we just built a chatbot and we programmed the chatbot, right, from scratch. And that's another thing that not everybody knew how to do. So bringing everybody in to be able to look at, how is this done? What did we do? How are the workflows designed? How did we overcome this, right? And look at the next stage that we're working on and look at the cool stuff that we're doing. Well, how'd you do it? Teaching the other people those processes in order to do that. That's kind of like where the knowledge sharing meetings come in, right? It's more like you tell me what, you tell everybody what, something cool that you've learned or something cool that you've done, and now demonstrate it and teach it, right? So the other people can have the benefit of that, as opposed to, it's more like peer mentoring if you want to really simplify it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like, and it's the business continuity as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you have the one guy that knows how to build this app or this chat bot, as you mentioned, and then he hits the lottery tomorrow and decides to just quit, like I would. No, I probably wouldn't, but you know what I'm saying. Then
Sure.
it's like the next person that comes along and says, "Well, how did you do it?" It's like, "Well, how do we get back to the moon?" I don't know. We lost that technology. That's what they keep saying.
Yeah, so one of the biggest pet peeves I have is documenting everything, right? I am a process nut. Okay, so whatever we do, we have visual transparency into everything, right? So if we build something, it is completely mapped and documented. If we have a new routine we've designed, it's completely mapped and documented. Any kind of information that we get that's new, it gets published. It's not ever stored anywhere else except someplace where everybody can have global access to it. And this is one of the things that I promote when I teach, with other, leaders, is that you have to get in the habit of documenting everything meticulously, because that document is your roadmap to success, right? It is your fallback plan if, in fact, you lose an employee for whatever reason, and you now have that information as opposed to trying to extrapolate it, from a little bit from this person and a little bit from this person. And then it also makes, changing and modifying things a lot easier moving forward. A lot of tech teams don't document a lot of stuff that they do, which is the downfall to very poor performance and very poor customer service, to be totally honest.
So is that also part of your training, learning how to document things? Because I mean, you just reminded me, I think back years ago when we were told, you got to document everything. Document. It didn't happen if you didn't document it. And there's this like level of fatigue that begins to, set in when you're like documenting everything. And it's like, man, because you're doing it wrong. You know what I'm saying? This is the way you document the process. And yeah, I mean, it could be a boring part, but it is extremely necessary. I'll agree with you right then and there. I wouldn't know what I do sometimes without my flow charts and my documents. But is that something that's also part of your training on how to document different things?
Yes. So client-facing documentation, I created the standard at the company that I currently work for how all client-facing documents will be produced. Version control is a big thing too, that a lot of companies don't take seriously, but we found out the hard way, right? When I first got here, I'm like, hey, what's the most current document? There's 12 of them. And nobody knew. So we started from scratch. And this is a challenge that a lot of companies had when they were just trying to, grow, develop, and just get information out the door. When it comes to tech teams, you need to have a standard of what you expect them to provide in your service tickets, as an example, because not always is the same person going to be working those service tickets. So you have to set a standard, and that is incumbent upon the leader to teach that. Right? Whatever standard works for them. My teams, they know exactly what I want in those tickets and they put them in. And we help them by automating certain things. We have different fields that auto-populate so they don't have to keep doing the redundant stuff. But the information pertaining to how they service or what they're servicing at that moment needs to be done in a systematic and formatted way. And yes, that is something that I teach all my teams.
Let's talk about feedback loops and KPIs. When you're going through your training processes, what sort of KPIs do you use to measure, the training success? And what about feedback loops? How do you use those to be most efficient and beneficial for you?
This is a really good question. So I have my viewpoints on KPIs, and I'm not going to share them because I'll probably get in trouble. I'm just kidding. No, I think KPIs are very important. I do think sometimes we put way too much stock in KPIs, right? In some cases, they're good, right? But you have to think also training, that's different because in training, you have measurable outcomes, right? Either the person learned or they didn't. Okay. Right. But it's not just did they learn or they didn't. It's how they're learning at different stages. Are they learning at the different milestones, right? So how do you measure that? Well, of course, there's competency testing, right? You can measure that way. You can measure basically by doing peer reviews, right, of that individual. So give them a task, have a peer review it, come back with suggestions or commentary in relation to how well they did in comparison. Another thing could be is, you can have I've done this before, which is have an anonymous survey of the class. So each person would be given a project and then have the task, have the class actually grade that person, right? Do you think this person absorbed the information that was provided in the last week, right? Something of that nature, right? These are ways of getting, immediate feedback, right? Also having, one-on-one sessions with individuals, getting that feedback. Are you learning? Is this, ask them those probing questions. Ask them questions that they probably don't expect you to ask and see what their responses are, right? So like when you do a job interview and you throw that, monkey wrench question in there that the person was never prepared to answer and you just want to gauge their response, right? Same thing here, right? They know what you're going to be asking. They know what they've just learned. Well, ask them something off the wall pertaining to what exactly they learned and see how they respond to that. Did they really absorb what you were trying to teach? So there, I think KPIs are really super important because if they're not learning, you want to make sure that when they leave you, they've learned. So you can actually course correct and remediate before it becomes problematic, right? From a managerial standpoint, when it comes to tech support, I'll give you an example. My two teams are totally polar opposites, right? So we have my SaaS product on one team, and then we have my install product on the other team, right? And they're in two different parts of the United States for the most part. You can't evaluate my tech team in California on the same standards as the tech team in San Antonio, right? There's no way because the products are so different and there's
Right.
so many variables that would impact those KPIs. LSAs, would be blown out of the water, right? SLAs, I'm sorry. Our service level agreements would not be, the same. And some are just, will be totally over the limits, regardless of what you put them as, because of variables they can't control. As opposed to my other team, I can put those SLAs in place and they'll meet them with no problem. The other thing is how do you gauge when a person learns? When they're on the job and then they're getting evaluated by your customers, whether it be NPS or whether it be CSAT, and they're getting those positive responses and those positive scoring. That's how you know people have learned, right? When they're able to do their job correctly right out the gate.
I love that. We have one client. It's a large, it's a big, global client, and I can't say their name, because of
Mhm.
NDA. That's why I was pausing because I was like, I don't think I can mention who they are. However, they being as large as they are and being that they have several partnerships with several BPOs all over the world, and we just happen to be lucky enough to be one of them. Their training process, believe it or not, is pretty fair, I would say. That they do it in batches of 20, 30 agents. They do the training. There is a competency test. Those that don't pass go back into training. They give their feedback and they try to help them along. They're setting them up for success. And that's not something you often see in like really large corporations. You know what I'm saying? It's usually, hire fast, fire fast, right? They really take the time. And I was reminded of it when you were, explaining, your two different teams. You're right. Going from one business to the next or whatever, you could have a rock star, a tech agent come in that was great at another company, but might be struggling still to grasp the processes and everything else for this new company. So their level of learning, and sometimes you have to get them to unlearn, certain things that they're bringing with them from that last position.
Absolutely. And to your point, right, it costs more to hire than it does to fire, right? So you think about it, keeping an employee that's here, right, and remediate them is a lot less expensive than hiring a new person, right? And then basically bringing them through the process of getting up to speed, right? I don't like the word firing. I don't like the word layoff. I don't like to see it happen to anybody. And if there's a way I can prevent somebody from losing their job and remediate them and making them better, then I'll do what I have to do that. It's up to them, of course, to take the information and move forward with it. But most people don't look, like you said, most people don't look at it that way. We invest a lot in remediation, right? We think everybody's valuable. We think each of them has something positive to bring to the organizations that I work for. And yes, when they have problems, it's not punitive, right? It's an
Mm-hmm.
educational moment, right? We take a different cultural aspect of things, and we try to sit there and find out what the problem is, how we can help them, how we can teach them, and how we can make it better for them moving forward. One of the other things, though, you were asking too about how do you gauge success in training, retention, like people that understand their job stay. People that are
It's that
frustrated leave.
simple. It's that
Yeah.
simple, isn't it? It really is. It's the same in sales. That's what I'm sitting here thinking. It's like, well, how do you gauge if your campaigns or your lead generation is working? If I have clients, it's just that simple.
Mhm.
And right, if people are staying, if they're not burning out, they're not falling over, then you know and they're happy and engaged, then that that it's working. And it's really just I love that. I'm sorry that made me chuckle because it is that simple. You
It
know,
is.
just
Mhm.
keep it simple. That's what I'm always saying. Now, so we've got the agents and we've got the tech guys in there. With your and we touched on this before, but with your background in L&D, can you share any other tips on how to foster a culture of continuous learning and development? I know we talked about uh let me go back in my notes here. I wrote that down. The knowledge building exercises, the business continuity and everything else. But to have that ingrained in the culture that they're wanting to learn more. How do you tackle that?
Well, the first thing is you have to promote learning as part of the company's culture, right? The leader should regularly share new learning and encourage curiosity. This is a big thing, right? We need we need the leaders at the top to be promoting this too. So it needs to become part of the fabric and the culture of the organization. The big thing, LMSs, right? You have to have a robust LMS, right? And have information and training accessible, updated information at all times, right? So this is another thing that, that we really need to focus on to make sure that people are getting that education that they need. And it needs to be up-to-date material with fresh courses, not the same boring stuff over and over and over. Incentivize learning, right? How do you incentivize learning? Well, there's lots of ways, right? It could be competitions, like I mentioned. It could be recognition, public recognition, maybe at a company event. It could be through a newsletter. It could be just something, right? But you need to make some sort of incentivized learning, make people want to learn, right? My way of doing it is a pathway to advancement. Right. You need to show me that you're learning if you want me to help you advance in the organization. So you need to do this, 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 and this, and this first. Right. And then demonstrate it. And then we'll talk. Right. So there's an incentive there. I have an employee who wants to go in a different direction in the next 5 years. So I'm like, okay, let's figure out how to get you there. Right. I need you to learn this first. And believe it or not, he's digging his teeth into it and he's learning. Right. Because he wants to get to where he wants to go. So there's an incentive for him to learn more that benefits the company now, enhances his skill sets, of course, and makes him more marketable regardless. But it's getting him where he wants to go. Right. So that's kind of a big thing. And then also, you have to have a development plan. Right. You have to have a plan, period. Right. You just can't just throw it against the wall and hope it sticks. Right. So these are some of the main things. We have to look at the growth plan of an employee. Right. And how is learning going to get them where they want to go? And then tailor plans or tailor, small consumable modules based on what they want so it can enhance their current position and also, like I said, give those stepping stones to, to future advancement for those people.
It's definitely important to have a plan and not just a concept of a plan.
I agree. And I have a plan and a backup to my plan and a backup to my backup. So.
I like that approach. What I use with Daisy is a lot of goal setting. I'll talk to her and, we sat down, we just had our one-on-one. I actually flew down to General Santos City where she lives. We were both remote. So I flew down there, we sat down and, had some coffee and pulled out our laptops and we set some goals. And I was, what really, got her excited was I want to see you doing this, or I want to see you here, in 6 months. Really? You think I can reach that level? Absolutely. But this is the plan that we need to do. You need to do this. You need to learn this. You need to study this. And she's doing it. And I don't, like you said, I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to think about it. I know she's doing it. I know she's working because we've set that goal. We've made the plan. Now it's in her hands, right? She's self-managing. If you want to get here in 6 months, this is the goal we set, then you'll do whatever it takes to get there.
I totally agree. But your plans have to be realistic, right? That's the key.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? You need goals, absolutely. Same thing with goal setting and stuff like that. They can't be unattainable. They can't be easy. They have to be measured and attainable, but still challenging, right? And that's the key thing too, right? When you set these KPIs or you set these kind of, the unrealistic expectations with teams and stuff like that, it's demoralizing, right? When they can't get there, especially when it's going to be like a major stretch for that to happen, right? I challenge all my teams, right? I work them and I challenge them to do better, but not to the point where they're going to fall so short that they feel they failed. Right. And that's a key balance that leaders need to understand is that, we want to look good to our bosses. Right. But you're not going to look too good when your employees are depressed and their work productivity goes down. So it's a give and take. You really have to be strategic about how you do planning and how you set goals and getting them on a path to going where they want to go. You still have to make a realistic path. Right. Not something that's going to just inundate them to the point of they just get frustrated and give up.
Right. I mean, and I'm glad you followed that up because that is a great point. It's not like you can't come out and say, well, in 6 months you need to learn French, in order to get to this point. And I also like what you said about, KPIs and all that. They need to be achievable, not easy, not just show up for work, that's a KPI, but, something that you're going to have to work for, pay attention and stay engaged to reach this KPI. I remember, I worked for one one company, as a tech support agent, and the KPIs were unrealistic. I mean, it was like, a 9 out of 10 on CSATs over this period of 3 months. And it's, another one of the KPIs was actually the number of CSATs that you get, and it's like, that's not in your control. You can, email somebody so many times, say, please fill out the CSAT. If they don't want to, they're not going to. You can't force them to. You know what I'm
No.
saying? So that's just, an unrealistic and an unfair, KPI to set, especially the incentive for that was money, was bonuses, So it was very demoralizing, like you mentioned, for the entire team, because it was like, nobody's going to get that. They just like give up halfway through. So if you're not going to hit those KPIs, you're not going to get that bonus. A lot of agents are just going to relax and be like, well, I'm not going to get, the hell with it.
Why bother at that point?
Exactly. So circling back again, I love to circle back, to managing or leading, let's say leading remote tech support teams. How important is leadership visibility, and how can managers or leaders be visible to their teams while working remotely?
That is an awesome question. And I have a awesome scenario to tell you.
Excellent.
So
go for it.
I look at it this way, right? I don't think that a leader should ever ask anything of their employees that they themselves would not do. Okay, that's the first thing. And good example, like we were doing a complete overhaul on all of our customer-facing documentation and learning materials. And my team, they were just amazing individuals, right, during this time, because it was like very, very high paced, high stressed. We had a very short time period to do this, and they were working like dogs. I mean, honestly, they were just working so hard, and God bless them, because they never complained. The work products was great, but came to a point where we had to work on weekends. And that's a tough nut to tell somebody, right? It's like, oh, you got to work on the weekend, whatever, and they got families or whatever. They didn't complain because they knew their leader would be there with them. It isn't like, you guys got to get this done on the weekend. I'm going to go hang out at the beach, right? It wasn't that, right? So visibility, being side by side. I work with my teams. I do not dictate from a desk, right? I'm in there with them. I am in their work. I am participating with them in their work. I even have my teams teach me some things, right? Because I'm not all knowing, right? And they're basically smart guys, right? So I'm learning from them too. So that's the first thing, is that you have to be visible and accessible. So many managers I got this call, back-to-back calls, and I don't have time, and I can squeeze you in tomorrow, maybe for 30 minutes. No, when your teams need you, you find the time, right? And this is my best advice to any leader out there. Stop with those meetings that are useless and start focusing on what matters, which is the employees that drive success for your organization. Find time, be visible, and be accessible. That is super, super important, especially when you're virtual, because we do get plowed with meetings all the time, right? And some are important and some are not, right? And I've gotten to a fine art of knowing which are which. So that's the first thing. And then I always have these touch points with my employees. Like most managers do it like once a month. I do it weekly with every one of my employees. I put a lot of time and invest a lot of time in my employees. So I will meet with each one of them one-on-one every week, just to see what's going on, to see what I can do to help them, support them. Do they have any issues? Do they want to talk about anything, right? Do you want to share some of the work you're doing or challenges? And that is also very, very important. You have to be visually available too, not just behind a voice. They have to see you. And the only way to do that virtually is by video. So I don't like to get on video all the time, right? But I get on video with my teams. I'll let them see me. I make them get on video so I can see them. A lot of them give me resistance because they don't want to. I'm like, if I'm on, you're on, right? Let's do it. And then they'll laugh and they'll come on or whatever. So it's accessibility. It is being active in chats on a regular basis and letting them know you're there, that you're just not some figment that shows up when you're called upon like a genie, right? You're there because you care. And that's the most important thing.
That's great advice. And from your explanation, can definitely tell that you have not only a lot of energy, but a lot of passion for what you do. And I think that really makes a huge difference in the success of your teams.
Well, thank you for putting it that way. I care about people. I mean, ask anybody that knows me. I am 100% invested in my people, right? And I always tell them that they are more important than me, right? Your problems, your concerns far outweigh mine, because when you're successful, I'm successful. So what can I do to help you? Right. And you have to be able to get that relationship with these people so that they are comfortable coming to you, right? With whatever the situation
Right.
may be. I can't disclose some of the stuff that's happened in my last few years, but I've had some challenges come my way from my employees, and I've helped them through it. They were great, stellar employees regardless, but they became even better because somebody cared. And the comments were always, I never had a manager care about me like this. And they worked harder for you, right? When you show them that personal attention, and I'm not saying you have to go overboard, people. I'm saying you have to just be human and treat them with dignity, respect, and understand that they have issues. And it's your job to help them or guide them to some path to get away from those issues to be productive or mitigate a problem so they continually stay productive. But they all say that they never had a manager like me before. And I said, I'm not anybody special. I'm just being me. I'm just treating you like a person. I'm treating you the way I want to be treated in return. And in return, I got exactly what I gave them. And that's kind of like where I always try to get people when I teach. You need to get to this point. You need your employees to respect you blindly, right? And this earning respect thing is ridiculous. You give respect immediately to somebody and you tell them you hold on to it, because if you don't hold on to it, we're going to have problems. And that's something that they are challenged to continually just strive for so they don't lose that. You're giving them a gift. Now, don't take it away, right? And it's up to you whether you keep it or not. And this is how I challenge my teams to, be proficient. It's like, look, I respect you guys right off the bat. That's like an unheard of thing, right? You don't have to earn my respect. You're professionals. I hired you. I respect you. Now keep it. This is how you keep it. And I give them a list. And they work towards that list. And I think it's really fostered a very positive relationship with all my teams.
And it's like you said, keeping in mind that, these are people, and everybody, I mean, I know I have arguments with my wife. It puts me in a bad mood. You know what I'm saying? Or, and people are up and down all the time. I try to keep an open door, with whomever, with our VAs, with Daisy, whomever, if so that I like what you said there. I like that too, that, they feel that they can come to me with whatever, at any given time, whether it be personal or whatever. So, and it also helps with that understanding of, let's say that they have a performance dip for a couple of days. Well, man, I know, that is really stressed out about his mortgage or something, whatever, that there's an issue, and then how to address it, how to approach it, rather than just, circling back, penalizing and putting some, and that just makes the whole situation worse.
Exactly. I think that lack of, personal interest in employees, right, is really a problem in larger organizations. It's hard, right? It's hard when you have so many of them that you're responsible for. You have to make that effort, right? Especially when you see there's problems, you have to make that effort. And then you have to approach it in a way where, like you said, you have to build that relationship where they feel comfortable telling you their problems. And then how you deal with it, you got to be really, very careful, because, a person in that kind of a state of mind, your advice, they're coming to you and they're opening up to you. Your advice is going to have weight. Be careful on how you respond, right? Think through those responses. But the main thing I tell people is, I understand what your situation is. Let's find a way together to get you through it. And then whether I have an answer for them at that moment or I have to do research, but one way or the other, we're going to figure it out together. They're not alone. And once they feel that bonding, right, and that respect that you're giving them, trust me, they'll move mountains for you if you ask them to.
Oh, absolutely. I keep talking about Daisy, and we always joke because, she's always, well, not always, I shouldn't say that. When she comes to me with, she's having a migraine, or she's feeling that she has the flu, right away I send her to the nurses. I said, you need to take the time, you need to take the day off. I can manage, but here at Telework PH, we have 24/7 nursing staff, for our employees. So, I want to talk to the nurses. Let's make sure that this isn't she's an adult. She doesn't need me to tell her, to go talk to the nurses or to, take her medicine. But I feel it's just that gesture to show that I genuinely do care, and because I do. I mean, it's not lip service, but, it just give them that feeling that, a lot of people, when they get sick or they have issues, and that might affect their work day, they feel they're going to get in trouble. I've been there, and I just want to reassure my team, that you're not going to get in trouble if you're sick. People get sick. We're humans. I wish I didn't get sick, but I get sick like everybody else. I have bad days. I have up days. I have down days. Just the way it is. So, hey, John, we are running out of time, but we've been talking about, remote teams and building a minute, and you have, based on this conversation, you have really just perfected the art of managing and building remote teams, training those remote teams. What last bit of advice would you have for anybody out there, any business leader or support director that might be struggling with building and managing or training even that remote team? What last bit of advice would you want to give?
If I had to give advice based on that question, I'd probably say you got to start by investing in the right tools and infrastructure, right? You just can't have, build as you go, right? So you need to invest. Solid LMS as an example, right? You need to have that structure in place. You need to have well-created, organized, and accessible training, right? So you have to understand that people are going to be accessing this at different times. So it needs to be organized, structured, and accessible. The trainers, you need to have good trainers, right? Not everybody who's knowledgeable can train, right? You might have a rock star in the company, probably can't deliver a message to save his life, right? That's not a good trainer, right? A trainer is a very unique person. So you need to hire the right people or promote the right people within the organization to do that training. I think that in remote engagement strategies are super important, and feedback loops, and being receptive to, I would say, constructive criticism from the people that you teach and the people that you lead, right? You need to hear them and address and act upon those concerns. Foster a culture of inclusivity maybe would be good. And continuous learning. So you want to have them inclusive in that learning process, like I mentioned before. It's really super important that they take part in that. I really think the biggest thing is that you really just need to understand that all of us learn differently, right? Some are audio learners, some are visual learners, some are hands-on learners, some are, whatever. Not one person is going to learn the same. You need to be able to adapt and understand and course correct to each one of those type of individuals. And how you do that is by having a multitude of modalities available for these individuals to learn. But the key thing is that you need to identify issues before they become problems and act upon them and do that remediation so that you will be successful and be able to build a very successful and educated team moving forward.
That is excellent advice, John. Excellent advice. John, we are out of time, but I'm going to tell you, I have taken a lot of notes here from this conversation, and I'd like to perhaps do a part 2, a follow-up to this, and dive deeper into some of these things that we've already discussed. So hopefully I can convince you to come back and do another episode, perhaps after the holidays.
I would love to, and I really appreciate you bringing me on, and it's been a pleasure.
And that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Telecast PH. Thank you so much for listening. I've been Jeff Thompson, and if you're ready to explore what offshore outsourcing can do for you with a remote team or a virtual assistant for your business, check us out at www.teleworkph.com or connect with me on LinkedIn. And until then, may the force be with you.